right? If someone was walking fast in front of me, in New York City, I'm probably not going to try to catch up to them and really just like visit with them about their life. But out there in the wild, in the wilderness where you're all kind of, there for the same or similar goal of just enjoying nature and kind of getting away from things, you can actually make really nice connections with people. Hi, I'm Carrie.
And I'm Molly.
And you're listening to the Two Sisters on Adventures podcast. This is our final episode of The Winds, and if you notice that things sound a little bit different, it's probably because I'm now recording without my gallbladder. So that's why there was a little break in our podcast last week. I just want to get more ultralight for the trail, and the gallbladder was just weighing me down too much at like 6 ounces or whatever it was. Some people get rid of half of their toothbrush, but they're not committed like me.
Dude, that's like probably several utensils that you eliminated.
Now I can bring so many utensils because I'm not bringing that.
6 ounces.
So anyway,
that's like extra Nerds gummy clusters.
Yeah, like 6 extra Nerds gummy clusters, maybe an extra 1/16 of a Hershey's bar. I don't know. But anyway, we're back. We're excited to talk about our last week in the winds. Our last day in the winds. So you may remember the night before we just had a really nice time at our private lake. The other group that had been up there swimming when we first came had gone down to camp. So it really was kind of just a totally private spot. And I thought that was a cool thing about the winds, basically, that yes, you're in a spot that's, the most popular spot in the winds, but you can still kind of easily find a campsite where you can be all by yourself.
Yeah, and when we crawled out of our tent in the morning, I feel like we were both so shocked when we touched it that the tent was totally dry. It seemed like this was one of the very first times we crawled out of our tent in the Wind River Range, and our tent was dry. And the whole night, it's just so interesting how the wind will come just rushing down the side of the mountain. And I feel like there was like a little bit of that. We were like really situated in a nice area where we were surrounded by trees, and we were beneath quite a few different rocks that were sticking up higher than us. So there wasn't really any wind flapping around our tent, but you could kind of hear it blowing around. And I was just certain that it had to have rained. And then when we got out and our tent was totally dry, you just feel like a real winner, because after we hiked out today, we had a bit of driving that we were going to do. And so it's not like we'd be able to air out our tent right away in the next day or so. So we just were so thrilled that our tent was dry.
And also, it was really nice because the last thing you want to do after you drive like 16 hours after you've backpacked for a week is immediately take your tent out and set it up when you get home at like midnight. And so we knew that it was going to minimum be like 2 to 3 days before we even were going to be able to get our tent out. And we actually had gone on an adventure earlier in the summer. We were trying out a different tent. And we put it away wet and left it in our pack wet for, I believe, 1 day. And it actually delaminated the tent, which basically, it was very confusing to us at the time. But I guess it kind of is like the waterproof coating came off. And it was only our 4th or 5th time using the tent. So we actually were able to return it to REI because of their return policy, which they were pretty appalled that had happened too. But now we're kind of traumatized about putting our tent away wet for even like 1 day. Although I'm pretty sure we have a friend who just puts her tent away in whatever state it finds itself after a backpacking trip, and it may stay there for 1 year. So,
and maybe the next year she pulls it out and it's a bit crunchy, a bit crusty, and she pops that bad boy up and it performs for her for another backpacking season. So that other tent we had was just like a little too
finicky. We don't do a finicky tent. It needs to be able to survive on its own a little bit. Actually, we take good care of our tent. Once we learned about how we could wash it. So, I mean, I guess there was a few years there where we did not take care of it at all, but
it only took a really traumatic zipper malfunction and kind of derailing of a trip to learn that washing your tent is something that you can and should do. And we were really proud of ourselves this last season because we did the Lewitt loop around Mount St. Helens, and we actually made sure to wash our tent after that loop because they say that the sandy volcanic soil that you end up pitching your tent in can be really hard on your tent. So we even washed our tent mid-season this last year, so we are really growing to take better care of our gear.
You could almost say we take too good of care of our tent. So anyway, that's why we were so absolutely filled with joy on this morning. And I guess technically I can't say that it rained every day in the winds because there was a slightly over 24-hour period where we did not get rained on. And thankfully it was the last day, which was perfect timing. So we were just so excited about that. And then we were able to have just a nice, quiet morning, quiet breakfast. It's once again, we were all by ourselves and we just really enjoyed the cirque of the towers. We were like, wow, it's like hardly even windy here, which we would later find out was because we were in the heart of the cirque of the towers. But we kind of just took our time, put our things away, and kind of geared ourselves up to hike the 9 miles back out to the trailhead.
And it was one of those cloudless days. The sky was just beautiful and blue, and we had pitched our tent, once again along that lake that was just up close to these sharp granite spires, you could say. And so, yeah, we just had this really scenic area. And I think on day 7, the last day of our trip, I have the ability at this point to get a little nostalgic. Sometimes I think you're so done with a trip because it's taken everything from you and you just like need to have a cheeseburger that you're not feeling nostalgic. You're just saying, take me, like, legs, get me to my car as fast as you can go, and like let's do some things that people get to do in civilized countries and people with plumbing and such. So this trip, though, I don't know if it's just because we'd had kind of a really chill day the previous day, but I feel like I was really taking the time to soak it all in, and I was ready to be done that day, but also like feeling a little just nostalgic, like, oh, I don't want to leave quite yet.
Well, and I think we were also in such a good mood about our tent and in such a good mood about how we'd done a little bit of off-trail the night before and ended up at such an awesome campsite that we had kind of talked that night about maybe we wanted to just off-trail back to reconnect with the actual trail. So like rather than backtracking down to try and find the trail from where we'd gone, kind of going up around the cirque and like through a boulder field for a couple of reasons. One of which was just because we were ready to have a good time and we had no timeline. So we knew that we could do it. And if we had to backtrack, no big deal, right? This is our last day. We don't have a ton of miles to make up. And we could literally kind of see a path through. Not a path that not in the sense that people had worn down a path, because there wasn't a path, but it was like, it felt like we were kind of understanding how to look at, the curvature of the land and kind of how you could follow a natural point to point. So we packed up our stuff and said, well, we're just having such a good day. We're in such a good mood. Let's just go across the boulder field and kind of get a little bit of a taste of what it would be like if we came back for the Wind River High Route. Kind of some of the route finding type of things that you would have to do, because you want to, it's going to be slower and it's going to be a little bit more involved, but you want to just kind of see what it is in a low pressure environment. So that's what we decided to do that day.
And I was feeling really pretty confident after my experience with Texas Pass, how intimidated I had felt walking up to it and seeing how steep it was and how rocky it was. And then as we picked our way through, how it just felt like the trail just melted before us. Like we just found a route and it was fine and it was fun. So yeah, like Carrie said, this was such a low pressure day. We felt like, why shouldn't we try to do just a little bit of cross country, point to point, following the contour of the land and see how it goes. And we had looked at our map and saw that we could connect with the trail by going through that boulder field and then heading down from there. Or if we wanted to extend and go a little bit more off trail, cross country and uphill, then we could make it to a fairly iconic pass that you'll see quite a few people who hike the Continental Divide Trail, and the pass is called Jackass Pass. So we thought, well, maybe we should like head up there and take a picture with that sign because it's fairly iconic and we do have the time. Carrie and I had gotten some beta on the high route from a couple people on Instagram that had done the high route maybe the year before. And so one of the things,
or as I like to call it, they had done a variation of the high route, which is what almost everyone who's done the high route has done.
AKA starting on the high route and then bouncing down to the CDT to make up miles and avoid storms and then going back to the high route like many people do. One of the things they had mentioned was that there are so many spider webs, and Carrie and I hadn't done enough boulder fields in the Wind River Range to experience that. But as we set out, we did experience it. I suppose that there is just like an unlimited number of places that spiders could make a web when there's just a massive boulder field with rocks ranging from the size of a football to the size of a bus. So as we made our way through, we saw that there kind of advice about using your trekking poles to be able to kind of take down the webs as you go along versus just like going into your face or across your legs or whatever. That was very valid advice. And the boulder field, it looked impossible. Like when you look at it from the beginning, you see these massive boulders that are, you know, size of cars or buses, and you think, if I end up on one of those and then it's just a cliff, like I'll have to backtrack and then it's going to take forever. So it was exciting when we finally got into the boulder field. You would get to a really big rock, but there'd always be an option to go above or below it. And it seemed like as you got to each area that seemed like it'd be a sticking point or a hard place to get through, you would always find a path. And so we just picked our way through, and it was not fast going, but it was kind of entertaining.
And one thing that I will say is I thought it was odd when those people told us about how there were so many spiders and spider webs. I was kind of like, okay, that's kind of a weird thing to mention, but it is honestly such a hallmark of the boulder field was just like the continuous gigantic spider webs that I do feel that it was not only worthy of mention, but definitely a big part of, I think, off trail and boulder terrain in the winds. So the winds could also be called the spiders, I guess. Yeah. But we made our way across the little boulder field, and then it was just kind of fun to end up at the pass that we had seen from our campsite and kind of feel like, okay, obviously it's not like it was super easy, and it did add time, of course, but it was something that was totally doable. And it's always enjoyable to find those occasions where you can kind of work together and kind of be like, well, I think this would be a good path. And then you get to pick out your path and kind of just see how it goes. And honestly, I think it saved us quite a bit of time and a little bit of distance. So no regrets there.
And I'd had this fear that if we were to do some type of a off-trail route at some point in the winds, that when we got to the boulder fields, which I think a good amount of off-trail in the winds is going through these types of boulder fields and up and down passes. And I had this fear that we would go so slow that we just wouldn't be able to make good time. And I would say that having not done miles and miles of them, I still don't have a good idea of how slow we might go. But it was good to say, okay, we could do it for a shorter distance and we felt good with it. So why couldn't we extrapolate that to a further distance as well?
So we decided we were going to kind of go on up to Jackass Pass, which is the famous pass of that part of the CDT. And it honestly was, I would say, a must-do. It really was a beautiful area. You got to see kind of into the cirque of the towers and then a little bit into the way that you were going to go. And it just was so stunning with all the rocks. I don't know if we talked about this already, but it really kind of just reminds us of Yosemite, that area, with all of the beautiful granite and just, I don't know, the way that the rocks are so cool and stunning and unique in all their shapes.
And there's all these sheer cliffs, and you can see the handiwork of the glaciers just all over that area. And it's just, yeah, a beautiful place to take in. And in order to get up to Jackass Pass, we did like a little bit more cross-country side hilling on the kind of a grassy area. And that was really fun as well. And once again, it's such a freeing feeling. And I think this is the vibe of the winds, right? You want to be free. You want to go where you want to go. Like, this is the mountain range for you. That's a very standard form of travel here. And to experience that on our last day after having said no to doing that so many times because of weather concerns, just concerns about our own awareness of the area, being new to it. It was so fun to get that taste of it and say, I want to come back here and I want to do more of this.
And I think it's also kind of a freeing feeling because having done a lot of our backpacking and hiking in Washington, Oregon, California, places that are really highly regulated and there's a lot more people that go to these areas, you're really not supposed to. There's a lot of areas where it's like the most important thing you can do is stay on the trail, right? To kind of leave no trace. And, it's like more fragile alpine areas there, I would say. Whereas in the winds, a lot of it is just like rock and kind of these areas where you actually can get off trail and it's okay. It's not like you're just at Mount Rainier National Park, walking all over the alpine meadows where it says do not walk. It's like you actually are in a spot where it's kind of the culture of those mountains is a little bit different, where you can actually go and just say, oh, I want to go to this lake because I see it, and you can go to it without it being kind of like an issue. So that's kind of a cool and freeing concept as well.
And a fun full circle moment, which I don't want it to be totally full circle because I want to keep pushing and keep pursuing, but fun to think back to when we did the table in the Mount Jefferson Wilderness. That would have been in 2020, maybe something like that. 2021. How intimidating that was for us to do, just a couple, well, not even probably a mile total off trail, but it felt just so bizarre to us and so cool to reach a very unique destination, and then to kind of reflect back on how we've grown as backpackers and hikers, and what we feel capable of and what we consider challenging now, and kind of the payoff in terms of how you feel, what you've accomplished, and what you get to see. We were like, why did they call it Jackass Pass? What is this? And so we started to head down, and it was very steep. And then as soon as you get to the low point, you go right back up again. And then after you're done with that section of uphill, you look back at the pass, and you're at the same elevation as the pass. So it feels a little bit silly to descend and then reascend just to be at the same height as the pass, but they didn't make a suspension bridge here, so you just have to do it. And maybe that's why they named it the name that they did.
Yeah, and this part of the trail kind of surprised me a little bit because I knew we had 1,000 feet of ascent for the day. But, I guess I feel like we always talk about this. We like to do, if we're going to do uphill, let's just go ahead and do uphill. But this was...
And we can do uphill all day. Let's just do it. Let's chunk it all together.
Yeah, chunk together the uphill, chunk together the downhill. Let me get in my nice groove, and I'll get in my uphill gear, and then I'll shift to my downhill gear, right? But this trail had a lot of just uphill, downhill, uphill, downhill, uphill, downhill. So it wasn't like you were gaining a ton of elevation, because overall it was only going to be about 1,000 feet. But it felt so annoying to me because I just thought it was going to, I think for some reason I was like, the hard part of the day is over and now it'll be easy and probably all downhill. And so of course it was just kind of spread out through the whole thing. And then there were some like more rocky areas where you had to kind of, look at where you were going a little bit more, which again, I had already like turned off my brain where I'm like, oh, we're just going on the trail now. Very easy. I already had the hardest part of the day. And I feel like there were some people there who were like fast, and so they were following us really close, and then they finally would pass us. So it was just kind of an interesting thing where I had gotten in my mind really stuck on like, oh, I'm just going to go uphill 1,000 feet and then I'm just all downhill to the car. And it was not like that.
And was this one of the days where we decided we were not going to stop and eat a lunch? I feel like on these last days, even though 9.5 miles is a fairly long distance, when you look at what you have left in your pack and it's tuna, you think, I think I can get by on like one more Cliff Bar and then figure out something to eat once we get back to the Jeep. So we did push a little bit harder this day with like fewer rest breaks. I do remember at one point, Carrie's always good at helping to remind us as a team that we should eat something and maybe sit down for a moment. So we stopped, and there were these sheer cliffs across from us, and we actually picked out a couple climbers. So we got to watch them a little bit, and they looked so tiny on that massive cliff face.
Yeah, that was really cool. And finally, we ended up on this long downhill slope where we were going down to Big Sandy Lake, which is kind of another feature of the area. I was pretty excited to go there because I felt like people had talked about how beautiful it was, but it was funny because we were finally like alone, like there was nobody right in front or behind us. And so I think we were singing our horse song again for a while and just laughing hysterically, and finally stopped singing it. And then of course, 5 minutes later, somebody came by and I was like, well, maybe they'll think it was someone else they saw on trail that was singing that song. But we continued on down to Big Sandy Lake, and at that point it was getting pretty hot and very sunny. We were wearing all of our like sun gear and all that kind of stuff, and I always want to stop and swim in the lakes, but we rarely ever do just because it's also so tempting to just get to your car. And I don't know if we were already thinking about Taco John's for lunch, but spoiler alert, that's what we had afterwards, and it was amazing. So it's like you already have in your mind, like, I am ready to get out of here. But
well, it's also really annoying when you go swimming and then you have just totally wet clothes, and then you're like, now I'm going to be wet and sit in a car.
Yeah, and also like if your feet get wet and then your socks get wet and now your shoes are wet. But for some reason, I think we just kind of came to the lake and we actually saw a good spot that looked a little bit like it had a relatively nice sandy entry living up to the name of Big Sandy. And so we decided to go ahead and take a quick dip. And we did not regret it. It was really fun. It was really muddy by the shore. So I think then we decided to find a rock to climb out on. But it was just a nice little break in the middle of the day.
We got in the water, and it was one of those types of, it was kind of a sandy soil, but wherever you were standing, you had this just like billowing of dirt in the water. So we like would kind of go along, we swam a little bit, and then we did clamber up onto a rock to just dry. And so we didn't swim for too long, but it's just always so refreshing. And it was finally a day that was warm enough, even though it was windy, that it felt really good to get in and to just rinse off. There was also a mountain in the distance called Haystack Mountain, which was just a really cool shape. It was cool because it looked like if you would climb up like the cliff at the top, it was just kind of this rounded, like pretty long surface, which it was kind of reminded me of like what Half Dome would look like from the top.
So we finally got back on the trail near Big Sandy, and then I feel like we were just ready to hustle. We wanted to get out of there. There were a lot of people that were coming into the Cirque of the Tower, so that was kind of eye-opening to me, just how popular it was and how fortunate we were to have been there on, I think, a Thursday or a Wednesday. I don't remember. Was this a Thursday?
I think we hiked out on a Saturday.
Oh, you're right. It was a Saturday. Wow, my days were way off. Yep, that was definitely a Saturday. So it felt good to be hiking out on a Saturday when everyone else was kind of hiking in to spend the weekend there. And again, it was so crazy because like everyone was a climber. You know, they all had their ropes, and I just am always like, oh, you guys are so cool. But fortunately, later we were mistaken for climbers, which is just an excellent testament to how cool apparently we looked that day. So we were kind of just making our way along the trail and absolutely hustling when we got passed by this boy who was hustling even faster than we were. And I think, you know, maybe we said like, whoa, like way to go or something. And he, you know, said something complimentary back. And then a couple miles later, we passed him because he was sitting on the side of the trail. And he was eating Sour Patch Kids, I think. And I think we said something like, oh, that's like such a good, you know, snack or something. So he offered us some, and he had actually put some Hawaiian punch powder on them as well to make them even more sour and more calorie dense. So that was an excellent snack. Yeah. And so then I think later he started to catch up to us again. And, you know, we said something about, oh, you know, you made it, you're going to pass us. And he said something about, well, I'm sure I'll see you guys soon. But then we just kind of started visiting with him, and we were keeping up with his pace, which he was very fast. He was doing like less than 15-minute miles for sure. He was absolutely going. But it was super fun and interesting to visit with him. He had been actually one of the climbers that we had seen the night before that was watching the people climb on Pangora Peak that were there after sunset.
I think he was maybe even at the lake swimming that day too.
Yeah, we think that he was also at the lake, but it was just really fun to visit with him, and he was just talking about how cool it was to actually be able to climb there. And, you know, he was telling us about his life. He was from Hawaii, but he was going to school in Wyoming or Utah or something like that. And it was one of those really fun and unique moments on trail where, right, if someone was walking fast in front of me, you know, in New York City, I'm probably not going to try to catch up to them and really just like visit with them about their life. But out there in the wild, in the wilderness, where you're all kind of, you know, there for the same or similar goal of just enjoying nature and kind of getting away from things, you can actually make really nice connections with people. So he was, I would call, dragging us in a way. Maybe he didn't know it, but we made such good time those last couple miles to the car. And then, of course, there was the ultimate payoff, our parking space that was so close to the bathroom.
Yes. And close to the trailhead. We just got right in and we were like, let's get out of here. I don't even remember if we had any snacks in there. I feel like we'd been traveling cross country, so we must have had something good to nibble on, and said, let's get out of this place and let's find ourselves some food and some place to wash our hands. We were flying down those immaculate forest roads on our way to the highway to go back to Lander, and I love Pizza Hut pizza, and we'd had some the week before we went into the winds. So I was really thinking about Pizza Hut, but for some reason when we got into Lander, we drove past the Taco John's. And if you're not from the middle of the country, you might not know what Taco John's is. It's like Taco Bell, but better because they actually trademarked Taco Tuesday. So no other taco place can actually legally use that in their advertising, but Taco John's can. So we got these grilled like wraps from Taco John's. We were really enjoying them. And then
my big draw was they had some sort of flavored lemonade there.
Oh, yeah.
And whenever I'm hiking and it's super hot out, all I could think is I want like a raspberry lemonade slushie. And I still have never found one after hiking that's as good as what is in my mind and hiking. But maybe someday.
So once we ate that, I can't remember if we even had a hotel booked for that night. We were driving back to North Dakota. But first of all,
I booked it in the Taco John's.
Nice. We first of all had to drive back to Du Bois actually to get all of our stuff from the super convenient storage unit that we had loaded our stuff into about 8 days before. And so as we were driving back to Du Bois, we drove past this sign.
I was like, whoa, she's setting me up for something. And I was thinking about Pizza Hut. I was like, and we went to Pizza Hut? No, we drove past this sign, and as Molly's going by at whatever the speed is, like pretty fast, I was like, oh my goodness, it says we can see Sacagawea's grave. And Molly was like, no way, there's no way that's out here. So we're from North Dakota, which was part of the, states that Lewis and Clark passed through when they made their journey to the West Coast.
In fact, they even spent an entire winter here, and I don't think that they really enjoyed it too much.
So
it was very cold.
They also didn't like their winter on the Oregon coast. I don't think they were winter people. But so anyway, that was like a big part of state history. We learned all about it. And as people who went to Oregon a lot as kids because of family there, we also really enjoyed learning about the Oregon Trail. Like that was very fun for us. So going to see Sacagawea's grave, I mean, that's a can't miss, right?
Oh, and as we were driving, I was like, if our mom, who really fostered in us a love of history, and we were in like a musical about Lewis and Clark, like all kinds of stuff. I was like, if our mom knew that we had the opportunity to see Sacagawea's gravesite and we just drove right by, she would be like so sad. So we pulled the U-turn and decided that we were going to do a side trip.
Yeah, so we just followed all these signs. First they were like metal signs, and then they were hand painted. That would be like Sacagawea's grave over here. And we just followed all the signs until we got to a graveyard, and it was kind of cool. We saw they have like a really big, nice monument for her, and I think her son or sons are buried next to her. So it's kind of neat to see, but I don't know if you're ever randomly in that area, if you left your stuff in a storage locker in Du Bois and you've finished out at a town near Lander, it's really not that hard to go to.
Then, of course, I texted my mom thinking she was going to be so proud of me. And she was like, I don't think that that's the actual burial site. So then if you do a quick Google search, it seems that there is a point of contention that there are maybe more than one location that could potentially be where she was buried. But we still felt like we saw something that was historically significant and really awesome with, just kind of that idea of the peoples that have lived in that area, the Wind River area, for so long, and just having that connection and just seeing what that's like from a different perspective was really cool.
Well, that's all that we have to tell you about that story, unless you want to hear that we did get to go and have Pizza Hut in Cody, Wyoming, where we stayed that night, and we did pick up all of our stuff from our locker.
And we did go to Devil's Tower the next day, and we circumnavigated that, and that was kind of cool.
Yes, we did. So anyway, other than that, that story is done. We're done with the winds until hopefully we get to go back again. But if you would like to see any pictures or videos of the things that we talked about here, you can follow us on Facebook or Instagram at 2 Sisters on Adventures. Thanks so much for listening, guys. Bye.